"She's dead. Thank God she's finally dead." Those were the first words I heard from the lips of the man I had once called husband. They echoed, not with grief but with twisted relief, as if my death had untied the last knot binding him to decency. I watched him through the veil of death, my soul torn from my ruined body, floating above the sterile, cold hospital room where machines had stopped beeping minutes ago. The doctors had long since stopped trying to resuscitate me. To them, I was just another flatline, another body tagged and bound for the morgue. But to my family and my husband, I was nothing more than a stepping stone turned obstacle. They didn't weep. They didn't mourn. They didn't even pretend. "She was always in the way," my sister Camilla said casually as she sat cross-legged on the hospital room's family bench, filing her nails. "Always so self-righteous. Now we can finally divide up the estate without her interfering." The estate? My estate? The company the legacy I protected like a lioness because no one else in my so-called family had the backbone to preserve it. And now they would split it like vultures feasting on a fresh carcass. They didn't know I was watching. They didn't know I was listening. They didn't know I would return. And when I did, I would take back what they stole, starting with the throne they never intended for me to have, and ending with the man who betrayed me on the very bed where I once believed love lived. My name was Seraphina Vale. I was born the legitimate heir of the Vale Empire, a sprawling dynasty built on luxury goods, old money, and secrets darker than velvet night. My father called me his golden child until I was old enough to threaten the sons of his second marriage. My mother, once hailed as a goddess in boardrooms and ballrooms, died quietly under suspicious circumstances. No one investigated. My father remarried a woman half his age within a year. I was sent to boarding school in Geneva, groomed in silence and excellence. The message was clear: be perfect, be invisible, and don't get in the way. I obeyed. I became everything they wanted: beautiful, brilliant, silent. I graduated top of my class from the Sorbonne, fluent in 5 languages, with a mind sharp enough to scare CEOs twice my age. When I returned, I wore my strength like couture, and my pain like diamonds. They thought I would be content with the scraps. They thought I would marry for politics, not passion. So they handpicked Elias Calderon, my husband, a devastatingly handsome man with ambition as ruthless as it was well hidden. He wore loyalty like a tailored suit, pristine on the outside, but riddled with bullet holes on the inside. I loved him. I chose to love him. I let my walls down. That was my fatal mistake. He waited until I was comfortable, until I gave him access, until I made him the CFO of my division. Then, brick by brick, he dismantled everything I built. He siphoned funds under dummy corporations, funneled them into my half-brother's projects, and when I began to suspect, he poisoned me. Socially, emotionally, politically. Whispers started. Seraphina's becoming unstable. She's paranoid. She's cracking under pressure. They made me doubt myself, gaslit me until I questioned my own reflection. When the accident happened, no one even blinked. I died with my enemies standing over me. But fate, no, fury, was not done with me. Now I woke up in the past, not as a child, not in a stranger's body, but as myself, 2 years before my death. Same face, same mind, same timeline. This time I wasn't naive. This time I knew who my enemies were. This time I would not beg for a seat at the table. I would flip it, burn it, build my own, and when I was done, they would kneel before the queen they tried to bury. They say rebirth is a blessing. They're wrong. Rebirth is a scream buried beneath skin, a fire behind the eyes that refuses to die. It's the echo of betrayal that won't silence itself. It's opening your eyes to a world that once killed you, and daring it to try again. When I woke up in my old bedroom in Vale Manor, the gilded walls felt like a coffin. Everything was exactly the same. The ivory canopy bed, the French curtains, the rosewood vanity with the secret drawer I once hid Valium in just to get through dinners. But I was not the same. Not anymore. "Good morning, Miss Vale." The housekeeper, Marianne, entered without knocking, as usual. She was one of those women who pretended to serve while reporting everything back to the second wife, Evelyn Vale. "You've overslept. Your father wants you downstairs in 20 minutes. The Calderons are coming for brunch." My stomach turned. The Calderons. Elias. In this timeline, we hadn't met yet. Not properly. I remembered now. It was this very brunch where he first charmed me. All white smiles, sharp suits, and borrowed manners. He had slipped past my defenses like silk. Not this time. This time I knew the ending, and I would not walk into the slaughterhouse wearing white. I dressed with precision, a jet-black dress, high-necked and laced at the cuffs, elegant and severe. I pinned my hair into a regal chignon, applied lipstick like war paint. My reflection in the mirror looked like a queen in mourning, and that's exactly what I was. I mourned the old me, the naive heiress they buried alive. Downstairs, the drawing room buzzed with polite conversation. My half-brother Thorn was already entertaining Elias and his father, a venture capitalist with a reputation for devouring family-run dynasties like snacks. My stepmother Evelyn sat beside my father, draped in a pastel suit that screamed fragile femininity. Her fake pearl smile sharpened the moment she saw me descend the stairs. "Darling, you look so solemn," she said with a tilt of her head. "Is everything all right?" "I woke from the most enlightening nightmare," I replied, pouring myself tea. "In it, I died and no one cried." A beat of silence. Even my father glanced up from his tablet. Then Elias stood, and I saw him. Tall, golden-skinned, eyes the color of expensive whiskey, charming and deliberate. He offered his hand. "Elias Calderon, a pleasure." I did not take his hand. Instead, I sat beside my father, deliberately positioning myself between him and Evelyn. "Seraphina Vale," I said, voice ice-laced velvet. "The one they'll tell you to be careful around." Thorn chuckled awkwardly. "Seraphina's just joking. She's been away too long, forgot how to be civil." "I haven't forgotten," I said, sipping my tea. "I just no longer see the point in pretending snakes are kittens." Elias's lips curved into an amused smirk. He thought I was playing hard to get. He had no idea he was already on borrowed time. After brunch, I retired to the study, the one my father used to call his command center. It was filled with ledgers, antique globes, and a decanter he thought I didn't know he refilled daily. In this timeline, I had 2 years before my death. That meant I had 18 months before Elias started embezzling, and 3 before the Vale Board's quiet coup began. Time was my most valuable currency, and I wouldn't waste a second. First, control the assets. In my past life, I'd entrusted too much power to Elias and Thorn. This time, I would quietly transfer my shares into a separate holding company under a new name, a shell I alone controlled. Second, rebuild my network. I still remembered who stood by me when things fell apart. A single loyal friend. Bianca Varelli, former lawyer, now a disbarred paralegal thanks to a frame-up from Thorn. I'd find her again. She was a fighter. And this time I'd make her my sword. Third, discredit my enemies. I knew every dirty secret my family tried to hide: Evelyn's affair with a junior business consultant, Thorn's coke addiction and backdoor deals. My father's offshore slush funds disguised as philanthropy. I would use them all slowly, precisely, like poison in wine. Later that evening, there was a knock on my door. I expected Marianne, but it was Elias. His tie was loosened and his charm had turned casual. "I wanted to apologize if I came on too strong earlier," he said, stepping inside like he belonged. "I get the sense you're not the kind of woman who likes small talk." "You get the sense," I echoed, not rising from my desk. "How very perceptive of you." He grinned. "I think we could work well together. I read about your proposal for the equity restructuring in the Vale Foundation. That was brilliant." "Ah, so the mask dropped a little sooner this time." He was already sniffing around the money. "I don't work with people I don't trust," I said, "and I don't trust men who think charm is currency." Elias stepped closer, too close. "Then maybe you should give me a chance to earn it." I stood, and this time I met him eye to eye, not with love or hope, but with the cold certainty of a woman who had once died because she trusted a monster wearing a gentleman's skin. "I know exactly who you are," I whispered. He frowned. "Excuse me?" I said. I smiled. "I'll think about it." He left moments later, clearly unsettled. Good. Let him wonder. Let him feel watched. Because I was no longer the prey. I was the storm coming for everyone who once stood over my corpse. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. Revenge has a way of making insomnia feel like clarity. I spent the hours after Elias's visit rereading every contract I had signed in the previous timeline, every trust document, every line in the Vale inheritance structure. every clause I once skipped over because I had been too trusting, too loyal, too eager to believe my family would never turn on me. By dawn, my eyes burned, but I had a plan, and it started with erasing the woman I used to be. The world knew Seraphina Vale as a polished heir, a socialite whose charity appearances and magazine features kept the Vale family name in glossy headlines. They saw pearls, not poison, sophistication, not sharpness, a graceful ornament. That was how my enemies buried me the first time, not with violence, but with softness. They disarmed me with the myth they made of me. So I needed to kill that version, publicly, permanently, and I knew just the place to start, the annual Heirs Forum Gala. It was a gilded spectacle where second-generation billionaires performed relevance for each other, and the press. In the previous life, I had worn blush satin and delivered a timid speech about responsibility and heritage. This time I would burn the room down. Figuratively, for now. Bianca Varelli, the only person who stayed loyal to me after my downfall. In the last timeline, she'd been disbarred after Thorn leaked falsified evidence tying her to insider trading. In truth, she had refused to cook the books for him. She disappeared after that, shamed and hunted. But I remembered something most didn't. Bianca had a brother in Palermo who ran a boutique litigation firm under a different name. I found her there. She didn't recognize me at first. I stood outside the office's back entrance in the rain, trench coat soaked, watching through the window as she filled her coffee mug. Then her eyes met mine through the glass, and she dropped the mug. "Seraphina?" "No," I said as she ran out toward me. "Not anymore." We hugged briefly. She was trembling. "I saw the news. I thought," she choked, "I thought you died." "I did." She stared. "Then what? How are you?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I've come back, and I need your help." Bianca had always been blunt. She didn't waste time questioning the impossible. She just nodded. "Tell me what you need." By the time the gala arrived, I had done what no one in my family expected. I had formed my own corporation. Quietly. Legally, funded by dormant assets my father had written off years ago, combined with Bianca's strategic restructuring of dormant family real estate holdings. I named it Sovereign. No Vale branding, no family ties, mine alone. Now I walked into the ballroom of the Ritz like I owned the building. My dress was midnight velvet with a neckline sharp as a blade. My heels clicked like war drums. Every camera turned toward me. Every socialite paused. Thorn's fiancée, a shallow daughter of a cosmetics magnate, whispered too loudly, "Is she trying to look like a villain? Good. Let them fear me now, not pity me later." At the mic, I accepted my invitation to speak, and this time I didn't talk about family duty. I talked about fire. "You don't inherit power," I said. "You take it. And if they won't give it to you, build your own kingdom. Then watch the ones who once ruled over you come crawling to your gates, asking for mercy they never gave." Applause followed, mixed with stunned silence. Some called me radical, others called me arrogant. But every camera flashed, and by the next morning, Sovereign was the top trending name in the financial blogs. The headlines read, "Seraphina Vale, no longer playing the family game. She's building her own. The Ice Queen has arrived? Perfect. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them whisper, who is she becoming?" Because the answer was simple. I was becoming the woman they feared most. The woman who remembered everything. The woman they couldn't control. 2 nights later, I sent an anonymous tip to the Financial Regulatory Authority regarding Thorn's quietly ongoing stock manipulation within a biotech shell company Vale Ventures owned. It was enough to trigger an audit. Small, contained, silent, but just enough chaos to make him bleed behind closed doors. Thorn thought it was bad luck. He had no idea it was just the first drop in the storm. Meanwhile, Elias reached out again. A text, "You disappeared after brunch. Are you avoiding me, Miss Vale?" I replied, not avoiding. Strategizing. Some of us are too busy building empires to chase distractions. He sent back a wink emoji. Pathetic. He still thought this was seduction. He had no idea I would bury him. They said Evelyn Vale married my father for love. I always believed that lie. She was younger, softer, gentler. Everything my mother, Helena Vale, was not. My mother had ruled the Vale Empire beside my father like a true partner, fierce, strategic, and uncompromising. She ran the boardroom, she signed the checks, she kept the wolves at bay with the flick of a pen and a stare that could break men twice her size. And Evelyn? Evelyn fluttered her eyelashes and made tea. She bled femininity, sugar-coated obedience, and manipulated with grace. The media adored her. The family embraced her. My father, once a titan of industry, became her puppet. When my mother died, I was told it was a tragic accident, a fall on the marble stairs, no witnesses, no suspicion, no investigation, not even from me. Because I had been 16 and grief-stricken and desperate for a new mother to anchor me. Now, at 28, I was back in that same house, wiser, colder, watching, and the woman who once wrapped her arms around me in hollow comfort didn't know that I had returned to peel back every lie she'd ever fed me, starting with the truth about my mother. It started with a key, a small rusted one Bianca found in a sealed envelope among old files I'd preserved in a lockbox back in the city. The envelope had no return address. Only my mother's initials. H5th inside was a note. If anything happens to me, don't let Evelyn touch my study. The truth lives there. So does the rot. I stared at those words for a long time. In the past, my mother's study had been sealed off after her death. At Evelyn's request, she said it was too painful for the family to revisit Helena's private space. My father agreed. The staff followed suit. No one entered that room in over a decade. Until now, the key turned in the lock with a metallic groan, like the house itself remembered what had been done. Dust coated every surface. The air smelled of old paper and lost time, and in the center of the room sat a box, unmarked, untouched. I opened it with gloved hands. Inside, journals. Dozens. My mother's handwriting stared back at me, elegant, sharp, furious. The entries spanned months before her death, and as I read them, the pieces began to fall into place. Evelyn hadn't just seduced my father. She'd positioned herself within the company long before the affair began. My mother had suspected embezzlement, small, quiet discrepancies in the foundation accounts, money redirected into shell companies linked to Evelyn's maiden name. When Helena confronted my father, he dismissed her, called her paranoid. She began investigating on her own. The final entry chilled me. If anything happens to me, tell Seraphina to trust no one, not even him. Especially not him. Evelyn is not what she seems. The whispers I've heard. She wants everything, and I'm in the way. 2 weeks later, my mother was dead, and Evelyn moved into her bedroom the same night. I didn't confront Evelyn immediately. No, that would be too easy. Instead, I mirrored her, smiled when she smiled, praised her in front of guests, brought her tea laced with subtle ingredients designed to cause headaches, anxiety, and minor nausea, just enough to keep her off balance, paranoid. And I began slipping things into her world that made her question her reality. One of my mother's scarves, left folded on Evelyn's vanity. Her wedding photo with my father, removed and replaced by a framed image of my mother at a Vale board meeting. A bottle of perfume she never wore, Helena's signature scent, uncorked and left in the hallway. I was the ghost she never believed would return, and she was starting to feel it. One night I watched from the hallway as she snapped at the staff in a whisper shriek, "Who moved my things? I don't wear valerian rain." That was her scent. "Why is it here?" No one answered. Because no one knew. Except me. I was haunting her from the inside, and she had no idea I'd only just begun. Step 2 was public. Evelyn's power didn't come from her intellect, it came from her image. She cultivated it like a garden, philanthropic, maternal, elegant. She was chair of the Vale Family Women's Initiative, patron of 4 art galleries, and ambassador for 3 elite charities. But her most beloved jewel was her annual Daughters of Grace High Tea, an exclusive gathering of women from generational wealth, political bloodlines, and celebrity marriages. It was a peacock display masked as a charity auction. This year, Evelyn made the mistake of inviting me. I attended, dressed in an ivory sheath dress that mirrored one of my mother's archived looks down to the brooch. It was intentional. Evelyn noticed the moment I walked in. Her smile twitched. "Oh," she said too brightly, "that brooch, that was..." "My mother's," I finished. "Yes, I thought it appropriate. After all, this tea celebrates women of legacy, doesn't it?" She recovered quickly. "Of course, dear. Helena would be proud to see you embracing your roots." "Would she?" I asked, letting the silence stretch just long enough. Sometimes I wonder. By the end of the event, I'd managed to strategically steer conversations with 3 influential guests toward subtle insinuations about Evelyn's past, each hinting at inconsistencies in her story. Did she really come from an old money family in Tuscany? Was she really educated at La Sorbonne? Wasn't there some minor scandal involving her younger sister in Milan? No direct accusations, just smoke, just enough to make the other women whisper. By the following week, Evelyn's carefully curated public image began to crumble, first in private salons, then in social newsletters, and finally on the digital grapevine of high society. Is Evelyn Vale really who she says she is, from heiress to hustler? Anonymous sources suggest her origin story might be more fiction than fact. She was unraveling, beautifully, silently, and no one knew where it started. But I did. It started with my mother's scream echoing from the grave. I found it by accident, tucked in the back of my mother's old closet, behind a sealed panel that popped open under pressure, a painting, unfinished. My mother's signature brushstrokes, oil on canvas. The subject, me, not as I was, but as she saw me. Strong, regal, wearing the crown of the Vale Empire, shoulders straight, eyes like fire. At the bottom, in faint pencil, she will rebuild everything they destroy. I stared at that portrait for a long time, jaw tight, throat burning. It was like she had seen this moment coming, like she knew I would rise, like she had left behind not just warnings, but a legacy waiting to be reclaimed. And I would tear down everyone who had worn my mother's crown like a costume. Because I wasn't here for forgiveness. I was here for a throne. Every man like Elias has one. The first mistress, the one who thinks she's different. She believes she's not like the others because she came before them, because he whispered secrets to her, because he bought her silence with silk and attention. But the truth? The first mistress is just the first fool. And I was going to enjoy making her realize it. In the previous timeline, Elias made his first fortune not through the family business, but by leveraging a quiet merger between 2 mid-tier tech firms, Oxworth Capital and Gleamcore AI. It had been risky, innovative, and for him, career-defining. At the time, I had supported him blindly, advised him when he asked, smiled for photos at the launch party, wore the damn dress. Then I found out he'd met his first mistress, Callista Morn, at one of the initial pitch dinners. A failed singer with a perfect face and a sad backstory. The kind of woman Elias loved most, beautiful, broken, and easy to rescue. She lasted 6 months in the shadows before he moved on. But now, I had names, dates, bank transfers, because I remembered everything, and if Elias wanted to play God in the markets again, I'd make sure he watched his world burn before the ink dried. I started with Oxworth Capital, the weaker of the 2 companies, but the one holding a massive AI dataset that made them attractive to Gleamcore. Elias's plan was simple: finalize the merger, release a press story about future innovations in predictive automation, and ride the media wave into investor gold. My plan was simpler: kill the deal. Legally, quietly. First, I had Bianca send a confidential dossier to the Oxworth board of directors, posing as a concerned whistleblower from inside Elias's team. Inside the report, proof of Elias's pre-arranged asset dumping plan, which would gut Oxworth's long-term value post-merger, fabricated but convincing. Screenshots of internal messages showing Elias mocking Oxworth's leadership. Evidence of a hidden kickback funneled through Callista Morn's shell company. They couldn't prove it all, but it was enough to hesitate. And hesitation was all I needed. Because once word of that pause leaked to Gleamcore's legal team, they pulled back. By the end of the week, the merger was under strategic review. And Elias? He was spiraling. I watched him from across the room at a luxury auction a few nights later. He didn't know I was behind the leak yet, not fully, but suspicion was beginning to creep in around his eyes. He was drinking too fast, laughing too hard, overperforming in front of investors. I could almost taste his tension. After the auction, he cornered me on the terrace. "You've been busy lately," he said, voice low. "I hear whispers." "Do you?" I sipped my champagne. Strange. I thought men like you only listened to screams. A flicker of rage passed behind his smile. "You used to be sweeter," he said. "No," I replied. You used to be better at pretending." He leaned in, eyes sharp. "Are you trying to sabotage me, Seraphina?" I smiled. "If I were, do you think you'd still be standing?" That shut him up. But his silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Elias never attacked head-on. He slithered, he corrupted, and I knew his next move would be retaliation. So I struck again first, at the root of his weakness. Callista Morn, the woman who had once told Elias she would never expose what they had, because it had been real. I found her in Barcelona. She now ran a wellness retreat for high-net-worth divorcees, a post-glamour escape fantasy in linen and whispered apologies. She didn't recognize me at first. I wore sunglasses, no makeup, hair up. I signed up for her healing from emotional manipulation workshop. The irony was delicious. Over herbal tea and guided journaling, I watched her posture. Listened to her avoid saying Elias's name but mention a past lover who taught me hard lessons. She was still waiting for him to come back, still clinging to the fantasy, so I shattered it. After one private coaching session, I handed her a folder, photos, bank statements, proof that she was never the only one. I included the name of the woman who replaced her, and the one after that, and the one after that. She cried. And I held her hand, not because I cared, but because I needed her angry. And when she was ready, I gave her a platform, a journalist, an exclusive story. Anonymous but explosive. From promises to power plays, the hidden women behind one billionaire's rise. Elias didn't sleep for 2 days. The final blow, for now, came in the form of a letter. Handwritten, sealed with my mother's signet ring, delivered to his office with no sender's name. Inside, you built your empire on women you never loved. I wonder how many are willing to stay silent now that they know they were never the only one. I wonder what the next one will cost you. By the way, Gleamcore has been in contact. They're considering a new partner. Me. There was no signature, but he didn't need one. He knew power doesn't vanish. It transfers, like currency or disease. When my mother died, her seat on the Vale Enterprises board should have passed to me. That was the unspoken promise of our legacy. She raised me not just as a daughter, but as her heir. But in death, they rewrote everything. They didn't say I was too young. They said I was too emotional, too unstable, too grief-stricken. So instead of letting me rise, they handed her seat to Evelyn, the same woman who wore her jewelry, slept in her bed, and claimed her husband. She became the family's matriarch and Vale Enterprises' newest executive board advisor. And I was sent away to heal, translation, vanish. But that was then. And this time, I wasn't waiting for a seat. I was coming for the whole table. The boardroom hadn't changed. High ceilings, mahogany table, 12 leather chairs, 11 men, and Evelyn. She was seated where my mother once ruled, just beside my father at the head. When I entered, their conversation stopped. The men stared. Some recognized me immediately. Others squinted, struggling to reconcile the girl they last saw in tears with the woman now walking toward them in heels that echoed like war drums. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I simply walked to the center of the room and laid down a stack of binders on the table. 12, one for each board member. They looked between one another. "Is this a presentation?" asked Frederick Lim, the oldest director. "No," I said. "It's a correction." My father finally found his voice. "Seraphina, this is a private company board meeting," I finished, "and as of 48 hours ago, I own 17.8% of Vale Enterprises shares." Gasps. 2 men actually leaned forward in disbelief. "I acquired the stake originally distributed among the Donahue Trust and the Beckman siblings," I explained. "They no longer wish to be passive investors. I gave them a better exit." My father's face paled. "You used your mother's inheritance." "I used what was always mine," I replied, "just as she would have." Inside those binders were more than shareholder updates. They contained the results of a private audit, one my team and I had commissioned quietly over 6 months. It exposed a decade-long pattern of misappropriated travel and marketing funds tied to Evelyn's foundation, inflated invoices for luxury expenses labeled as executive development, a forged signature on a philanthropic endowment Helena Vale once rejected, but Evelyn approved. All this slipped beneath a layer of charitable glamour and press photos. When I asked the board to turn to page 42, Evelyn shifted in her seat. Her voice dripped sugar and panic. "This is absurd. My involvement in the foundation is purely honorary. Your signature is on every quarterly withdrawal," I said, flipping the screen at the front of the room to a magnified scan of one of the documents. "Or shall I call a handwriting analyst?" Evelyn opened her mouth, but my father spoke first. "Enough." The word was soft, but deadly. "I want a 10-minute recess," he said, and everyone filed out, except him and me. When the door shut, he didn't look at me. He just stared at the screen. Then he said the one thing I wasn't expecting. "She warned me." I waited. "She said Evelyn would bleed us," he continued. "That she was hiding something. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't." "You didn't believe her," I said coldly. "Because she was smarter than you, and because it was easier to love a woman who smiled than one who challenged you." His hand tightened on the chair. "She wasn't easy to love. She wasn't supposed to be," I snapped. "She was supposed to be respected." Silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then he said, "You look like her." "No," I corrected. "I am her. And I'm taking back everything you gave away." When the board returned, I stood. "The audit results are clear," I said. "There has been a breach of financial ethics involving a sitting executive advisor. Therefore, I move to vote for Evelyn Vale's immediate removal from the board." Gasps. Evelyn stood, trembling. "You can't do this." "I can," I replied, "and I just did." "Who do you think you are?" she hissed. I walked up to her slowly, then leaned in and whispered, "The woman who watched you wear my mother's crown and decided it was time you remembered whose blood it really belonged to." Then I turned to the board. "Shall we proceed?" The vote wasn't unanimous. One man abstained. Another voted no, likely out of habit or fear or blind loyalty. But 9 raised their hands, and that was enough. Evelyn stood frozen as my father quietly nodded, accepting the result. Security was called, not roughly but firmly. She left in silence, and I sat in her seat, where my mother once ruled, where I belong. The second mistress always thinks she's smarter than the first. She studies the mistakes the other woman made, too visible, too emotional, too needy, and vows not to repeat them. She moves quieter, smiles softer, plans deeper. But what she doesn't understand is this. The second mistress is not chosen because she's clever. She's chosen because the man knows exactly how to control her this time. And the moment she thinks she's in charge, she's already lost. Bryn Adair, 32. PR strategist. Beautiful in the way curated Instagram girls are. Polished angles, soft lips, designer minimalism with a side of faux intellectualism. In my previous life, she entered Elias's orbit just as he transitioned Vale Enterprises into a media-facing conglomerate. He claimed he needed her expertise in brand messaging. What he really needed was someone who could spin his affairs better than his lawyers could. She was smart, just not me smart. But she was clever enough to hide in the margins for years. To the outside world, Bryn was an independent consultant, a rising name in elite circles. To Elias, she was the mistress who lasted the longest. To me, she was my next project. I didn't go after Bryn the way I did Callista. Callista was emotional, still aching from what she thought was love. Bryn, however, had built her career on lies. She knew how to pivot, how to vanish. She was dangerous, not because she cared, but because she didn't. So I changed tactics. I didn't confront her, I studied her. She had no real friends, only clients. She didn't speak unless she was being quoted, and she never let her name touch Elias's publicly. But power leaves fingerprints. I found them in her LLC's payment trail. Quiet retainer fees that matched exact dates. Elias made discretionary withdrawals from his family trust. I tracked her movements for weeks. Public dinners, gallery nights, whispered conversations with new tech startups Elias was quietly courting. And then I struck where it hurt most. Her reputation. I had Bianca create a pitch deck, flawless branding, a fake campaign called Valor, an edgy, ethics-based PR project supposedly spearheaded by Bryn's firm for a controversial biotech startup. The problem? The campaign didn't exist. And the startup was real, a volatile, lawsuit-ridden company under federal scrutiny. We leaked the pitch deck to 2 reputable business journalists with anonymous concerns over Bryn's moral alignment. Within 24 hours, social media lit up. Why is PR darling Bryn Adair ghostwriting ethics for a company under active investigation? Her strategy slides reference manipulation tactics taught in political black ops programs. What happened to conscious marketing? The damage was swift, subtle. Bryn issued a denial, claimed the deck was fabricated. But it didn't matter. Her current clients began to ghost her. Future clients canceled exploratory calls. She wasn't ruined, but she was bleeding. And that's when Elias showed up. He arrived at my penthouse uninvited. How he got past security I didn't ask. He stood in my foyer like he owned it, in a suit worth 5 figures and eyes full of fire. You're targeting her now? I didn't flinch. Which her are we referring to this time? You've had so many. Bryn had nothing to do with you and me. She had everything to do with who you chose to become. He stepped closer. You think this makes you powerful? Destroying women who were just collateral? I smiled. I'm not destroying women. I'm reminding them that you're the war they never meant to walk into. Seraphina, he growled, low and cold, this ends here. I stepped forward until we were inches apart. No, Elias. This is where it starts. After he left, I poured myself a drink, and that's when I found the envelope on my desk, cream paper, gold wax seal. Inside was a letter. You're playing the long game. But you forgot one rule, trust no one. Even the people you raised from the ground will sell you if the price is right. Bryn wasn't just Elias's lover. She's also your mole. Signed, a friend who knows how you burn. I didn't sleep that night. I reviewed every conversation, every suspicious timing. Every moment something had gone wrong over the past 6 months. And suddenly, I knew. The leak that almost exposed my audit, the PR team who bailed last minute on my mother's memorial campaign, the missed memo about the Oxworth deal falling apart too soon. Bryn had gotten to someone in my team. I had a traitor. The next morning, I didn't scream. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I created a memo filled with fake information, coded to look urgent, tied to a fake opportunity that would be too tempting to ignore. Then I handed it to a junior executive I had long suspected, and waited. Within 12 hours, the contents of that memo appeared in an anonymous email sent straight to Elias. Got you. I never asked for loyalty. I demanded silence. There's a difference. Loyalty is emotional. It wavers when it gets expensive. But silence is power. And when broken, it's irreversible. So when someone on my team fed information to Bryn, information that landed in Elias's hands, I didn't feel hurt. I felt sharpened. This wasn't a setback, it was an opportunity. Because the one thing more useful than a mole is a mole who doesn't know they've been caught. The bait memo I had planted was perfect in its imperfection. I labeled it Project Phoenix, a supposed plan to buy out a minor tech subsidiary that had just been quietly devalued. In the memo, I included a falsified timeline of insider meetings, a doctored quote from an alleged CEO interested in partnering with me instead of Elias, a subtle jab suggesting Elias's name was now financial poison. I printed one hard copy, slipped it into a folder marked private, and gave it to Rena Marin, the same executive assistant who'd joined my office 6 months ago, claiming she had once worked under Evelyn. I'd always thought it suspicious that Evelyn would recommend someone like Rena. Too efficient, too eager, too invisible. But I let her close, let her think she had my trust. And now, she had just committed her final act of service. When I received a copy of the leaked memo, emailed anonymously to an inbox only Elias used for sensitive acquisitions, I didn't get angry. I hosted a dinner. 12 guests, private room at Vellum, the most exclusive new culinary club in the city. Rena was one of the 12. She looked radiant, polished, clutching her purse like it held her purpose. The moment the second course was served, I tapped my crystal glass. I'd like to make a toast, I said. All heads turned. I've been betrayed, I began. Rena froze. My voice stayed calm. Someone on my team recently leaked a confidential document. It was marked private. It was given to one person only. And 12 hours later, it was in the hands of a man I wouldn't trust with a sugar packet. Chuckles. Uncertainty. Rena's face remained fixed, but her grip tightened around her wine glass. I raised mine. To betrayal. Everyone sipped, except her. After dinner, I asked Rena to stay behind. She didn't protest. I handed her a small black envelope, inside a printout of the leaked memo, and a photo of her, sitting across from Bryn Adair in a hotel bar. Time-stamped, tagged, watermarked, her breath hitched. I can explain. I lifted a finger. Don't lie, you're not good at it. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't hurt me, I said. You made me stronger. She blinked, confused. You gave me exactly what I needed. Proof that Elias and Bryn are still running scared. Proof they're still using women like pawns. I stepped closer. And now you're going to be my pawn. I didn't threaten to ruin Rena. I elevated her. The next morning I promoted her, gave her a louder title, let her handle confidential comms, moved her office closer to mine. Everyone thought she'd impressed me. In reality, she was my public countdown clock. Because once Elias realized Rena was my new confidant, he would assume she still worked for him. He would feed her, test her, and every word he spoke into her ear would now flow straight to me. I'd turned their spy into my double agent. And the next time Elias tried to make a move, I'd be there to catch it before it hit the air. That night, I gathered my 3 closest allies, Bianca, my legal strategist and former classmate from London, wicked, brilliant, merciless, Marco, my IT head, who once worked for the government and now owed me his freedom, Dr. Emery Lang, a retired psychiatrist who now ran persona risk profiles for high-level CEOs. We met in what we now called the War Room, a mirrored vault beneath my private estate. No phones, no signal, no leaks. On the screen behind me, I projected a map. Elias is planning something. I began. Bryn is the face, but she's no longer the architect. That job belongs to someone else. Bianca narrowed her eyes. You think there's another player? I nodded, and pointed to the name glowing red on the board. Victor Dagan, former Vale executive, disgraced financier, once Evelyn's silent partner, and the man Elias had secretly met in Vienna 2 weeks ago. He was the real enemy now, the kingmaker, and I had just put him in my crosshairs. Some men don't kill with poison or bullets, they kill with contracts. With terms buried beneath 15 pages of legal jargon, with clauses that strangle like silk ropes, with deals that steal breath before you even realize you're choking. Victor Dagan was that kind of killer, and I was going to unearth the corpse he thought he'd buried under a mountain of silence. Victor Dagan had vanished from public life after the Westbridge incident, where $140 million in retirement funds were siphoned into a shell company he didn't know existed. His name had been scrubbed. He no longer appeared on Vale's financial board, nor in any press releases. But he hadn't disappeared. He'd become a ghost. And ghosts always leave shadows. Bianca traced 3 new private equity firms, each registered in the Cayman Islands under a different alias. The pattern was unmistakable. Every one of them held shares in subsidiaries tied to Elias's recent acquisitions. Victor hadn't just returned to Vale's orbit. He was bankrolling its resurrection. And Elias was his puppet. Or maybe his heir. Marco found it, buried in a long-forgotten backup server, in an archived folder labeled simply Conf Helena. At first, we assumed it was just a finance recording. Helena Vale, my mother, had recorded almost everything. Meetings, interviews, private consultations. But this one was different. It wasn't audio, it was video. Date, 1 week before her death. Time, 2:14 am. She sat in her office, pale, red-eyed, wearing the same silk blouse she had on the day she died. She looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it. I couldn't breathe. Victor Dagan has been siphoning money from our charitable endowments for nearly 5 years. He's laundering it through Evelyn's dummy NGOs and feeding it into illegal biotech research that was not approved by the board. I confronted him. I threatened to go public. And he told me... Her voice cracked. He told me accidents happen. If I die, don't let them call it suicide. I was not suicidal. I was angry. And I was ready to burn the world. When my mother died, the report said overdose. No drugs were found at the scene, but a single bottle, empty, was placed beside her desk, labeled Temaril, a strong sedative, one she was never prescribed. My father never questioned it. Evelyn helped write the statement. I was 16, alone, and they said it was grief that made me suspicious. But now, I had proof. I had her words. They killed her. And then they covered it. Not just with lies, but with silence. And that silence was about to be broken. We staged a false acquisition. A shell company, Lyricor, supposedly on the verge of securing a groundbreaking fertility patent. We leaked whispers that I would be funding it through my mother's memorial trust. Victor took the bait. He sent a feeler, an agent named Calvin Holt, disguised as an investment intermediary. But Marco tracked him through 3 fake identities. We let Calvin make contact, and then we lured him to a meeting, where I waited. The room was windowless, concrete, chilled like a vault. I didn't offer Calvin water, didn't bother with greetings. "Tell Victor," I began, "that his next move will be his last." He laughed. "He doesn't know who you are." "He should. I'm the daughter of the woman he murdered." That stopped him. He leaned forward, curious. "You think anyone will believe you?" I pulled out a flash drive and smiled. "They don't need to, they just have to hear her." Then I turned on the screen and played the tape. Calvin didn't blink, but I saw it, the ripple of fear behind his eyes. Victor hadn't destroyed all the evidence. He'd just hoped no one would dig deep enough to find it. And now? It would bury him. Within 48 hours, Bianca delivered the tape to 2 key allies: Alicia Vorn, investigative journalist with ties to the Justice Bureau; Myra Feng, a sitting board member of a biotech firm Victor had once tried to bribe, and who still held a quiet grudge. We didn't release it to the public. Not yet. We let the whisper travel. Whispers are more dangerous than headlines, because they sow doubt before the truth ever lands. And Victor? He started making mistakes, sloppy trades, sudden withdrawals, cancelled meetings. The ghost was unraveling. And when ghosts bleed, it's only a matter of time before they vanish for good. That night, I visited my mother's grave. I didn't bring flowers. I brought the flash drive, and I buried it beneath her name. "Your voice saved me," I whispered. "Now let me finish what you started. Because the throne she died for, I would not only take it, I would make every man who tried to erase her kneel before it, starting with the one who called himself her partner, and ending with the one who once called himself my husband. They say time heals all wounds. Whoever said that never watched their mother be buried under a lie, while the man who helped kill her gave a tearless speech about legacy. Elias Vale helped lower her coffin. He kissed my forehead that day, whispered, 'She would be proud of the woman you're becoming.' And all the while, he had already begun helping Victor Dagan drain the empire my mother built. He didn't just cheat on me. He desecrated the one person I loved most. Now, he was going to answer for it. I didn't ask him to come. I summoned him. Sent a single message through our shared legal liaison, Thursday, 9 p.m. No bodyguards, no lawyers, just you and me. If you want to keep what's left of your empire, you'll show up. And of course, he came. Because even after everything, Elias still believed he had the upper hand. Still believed the little girl who once worshipped him was hiding somewhere inside me. But she died the night my mother did. What stood waiting for him now was a weapon in heels. He arrived wearing arrogance, silk jacket, loafers without socks, a designer watch ticking away time he no longer owned. He looked around my war room, its matte black walls, the hum of LED strips embedded in the concrete, and scoffed, "Very cinematic." I offered no drink, no pleasantries, only the chair. He sat. I didn't. "Do you remember what you said at my mother's funeral?" I asked. He blinked. "I've said a lot of things, Seraphina. You said she was the spine of this family, the heart of this legacy." A pause, and then you helped murder her. His lips twitched. "That's a bold accusation." "Not bold," I said, sliding the flash drive across the table. "Documented. He didn't touch it." But his gaze flickered. "She recorded herself the week before she died," I continued. "She named names, dates, amounts, and guess who showed up in her ledger? You." Still no reaction. So I twisted the knife. "You were siphoning board funding into Dagan's shell accounts. You said it was temporary, a restructuring, but you knew exactly what Victor was doing. Be careful what you imply." I slammed the folder down. His signature. His timestamp. "Do you want me to list the transactions?" I asked. "Or the email you sent to Evelyn saying, and I quote, 'Helena needs to be silenced before this spreads to the Foundation.'" His face paled. "You think you can destroy me with ghost stories?" I leaned in. "No, Elias, you already destroyed yourself. I'm just here to finish the burial." He expected rage, tears, a monologue about betrayal. What he didn't expect was the offer I made next. "I'm not going to release any of this to the public," I said calmly. "Not yet." He narrowed his eyes. "Why not?" "Because I want you broken, not erased. I want you to watch what you built turn into ash while you're still breathing." I paced slowly behind him. I want you to resign from the board of Vale Holdings. Not quietly, not respectfully. I want a press release that paints you as the unstable heir who's finally stepping aside for the good of the company. He stiffened. I want full control of the trust, the board, the majority vote. You'll sign it over to me, and if I don't? I smiled, like a wolf smiling before it bites. Then I send this flash drive to every journalist on the eastern seaboard, and I tell them exactly what kind of man gives a eulogy for the woman he helped kill. For the first time I saw it, the crack. Not fear, shame. He looked at the folder, at the evidence, at me. You weren't supposed to be this clever, he said quietly. You were always just the daughter. I didn't blink. No, I said, I was always the successor. You just didn't see it. Silence. Then, softly, Victor made me choose. He looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the man I once thought I loved. He told me if I didn't help him cut your mother out, he'd destroy us both. You, her, me. And you chose him, I said. Over her, over me, over the legacy she gave everything to protect. His voice cracked. I didn't know she'd die, I said. She didn't die, Elias. She was erased, like a stain on a perfect portfolio. He dropped his head into his hands. I didn't comfort him. He wasn't the victim here. He was the funeral dressed up as salvation. In the end, he signed every document, every clause, every condition I demanded. The empire was now mine, legally, irrevocably, and publicly. I didn't thank him, just packed the documents and turned my back. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. You're going to ruin me, he said. I turned, tilting my head. No, Elias, you ruined yourself. I'm just handing out the invitations to the way. That night, I stood on the balcony of my mother's estate. Our estate. Mine now. The ink was dry, the power restored. The throne she built was no longer empty. I whispered her name into the wind, and in the stillness that followed, I didn't feel triumph. I felt justice. And it was only just beginning. Power doesn't arrive like a trumpet blast. It arrives like ink drying on paper. It comes with handshakes, cameras, and smiles that are too white to mean anything real. The day I took control of the Vale dynasty, there were no protests, no screaming heirs, no overturned boardrooms. Only silence. The kind of silence that fills the world when a new predator steps into the clearing and everyone else plays dead. The ballroom gleamed. Chandeliers catching light like broken diamonds. The Vale crest projected in ghost white on a dozen screens. I stood at the podium, wearing the same cream suit my mother once wore the day she signed the final round of global expansion deals. It fit me better, fiercer, tighter in the spine. A journalist asked, Miss Vale, what does this transition of power represent to you? I didn't blink. It's not a transition, I said. It's a restoration. Cameras flashed. Another question, and your ex-husband? His resignation was abrupt. I smiled slowly. Sometimes history corrects itself. All I did was hold the pen. My first executive order was simple: forensic audit of the Vale family trust. It had been untouched since my mother's death, protected by a wall of lawyers loyal to Evelyn, wrapped in enough red tape to choke a dozen auditors. That changed in 24 hours. Bianca assembled a private compliance team. No one from the original firm. No one with ties to Elias, Evelyn, or their cohorts. I wanted clean eyes. Because I wasn't looking for dust. I was looking for blood. And I found it. The trust files were encrypted, hidden behind layers of legal obscurity and buried in foreign shell accounts. It was Marco who cracked it, after 14 hours and 3 firewalls. What we found wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. Inside the trust? A philanthropy initiative called Linmore Hope, supposedly a women's health nonprofit. Bank statements tracing $22 million from Linmore to offshore labs linked to illegal clinical testing. Names of unwilling participants, taken from underfunded shelters, immigration centers, and correctional facilities. Linmore wasn't charity, it was a front for human testing, and my mother's signature was nowhere on it. But Evelyn's? Everywhere, signed, witnessed, authorized. Evelyn hadn't just betrayed Vale Holdings. She had used the family's name to turn women's pain into profit. And the final nail? The date of the last transaction, 2 days before my mother died. Tucked inside one of the encrypted folders was a scanned letter, handwritten, addressed to me, Seraphina. If you find this, it means I couldn't stop her in time. I trusted Evelyn. She was my sister-in-law. My confidant. But she's built something dark beneath this company. Something I can no longer pretend not to see. They're using women, Syrah. Poor women. Invisible women. Testing hormones, implants, fertility inhibitors, all under the veil of progress. I tried to stop it. I threatened to expose it. That's when the threats began. If anything happens to me, don't go to the press. Don't go to the police. Take the throne. Only from the top can you bring it down. Make them kneel, my love. Make every last one of them kneel. Helena, my hands shook. But not from grief, from clarity. Evelyn hadn't just stood by while Victor siphoned money, she'd been the architect of her own side empire. My mother had tried to cut it out at the root. And they buried her for it. 2 days later, I sat across from Evelyn in the exact lounge where she once counseled me during the divorce. She was dressed in soft beige, like a woman who didn't want to startle the horses. "Congratulations," she said sweetly. "CEO looks good on you, but I hope you understand there's a balance to—" I placed a copy of the audit on the table, watched her color drain. "You should be careful with accusations," she said, fingers twitching. "The trust is legally airtight." I didn't flinch. "It was," I said. "Until you got greedy." Then I leaned forward. "And don't worry, I'm not turning you over to the authorities." Relief flickered in her eyes. "No," I added, "that would be too kind." I stood slowly. "I'm going to make your name synonymous with disgrace. You won't be indicted. You'll be erased. The world will forget you existed. And that's the one thing I know you can't live with." She tried to speak, but I was already walking away. I didn't need to hear her beg. That time would come soon enough. At midnight, I stood alone in my mother's office. Now mine. On the desk sat the original Vale seal, used only by the CEO for final signatures. I pressed it into the first order of dissolution, effective immediately. The Linmore Hope Initiative is terminated. All funds redirected to verified women's advocacy groups. All surviving test victims given restitution and legal support. And Evelyn Vale, blacklisted from all Vale-affiliated organizations. The seal stamped down with a heavy metallic click. It was done. Not vengeance. Not yet. This was cleansing. The house she built may have rotted, but now it was mine. And I had gutted the disease. They called it a gala, but I called it a funeral. Not mine. Theirs. The press was buzzing. The venue was booked. The elite poured in wearing velvet and silence, not knowing that by the end of the night, the air would be heavy with ash and ruined names. Because this wasn't a celebration of power. It was an execution in diamonds. And every guest was a witness. The invitation read, "A tribute to legacy. A night of remembrance and rebirth. Vale Holdings cordially invites you to witness a new era." They thought it was about transition, closure, peace. Even Evelyn arrived draped in cream silk, all false grace and strained smiles. Victor Dagan was there too, wrinkled, smug, sipping from a crystal flute like the walls of his empire weren't cracking under his feet. And Elias? He lingered at the edge of the crowd, gaunt in a charcoal suit, watching me the way men watch the sea before a hurricane. But no one knew the script. Except me. The ballroom went dark at precisely 9 p.m., not dimmed, dark. The music stopped, the laughter cut off mid-chime. And then the screens blinked on, 12 in total, surrounding the room in an LED ring of silent judgment. Each screen displayed a name. A woman's name, and then another, and another. 237 names in total. Every woman used, manipulated, or medically experimented on under Evelyn and Victor's clandestine project. Then their photos appeared, smiling, real, human, some survivors, some not. A quiet ripple spread across the room like a gas leak, panic, confusion, denial. And then I walked onto the stage, dressed in black, hair up, voice calm. "Good evening," I began. "I know you expected champagne and speeches, but legacy can't be toasted until it's cleaned." Gasps, murmurs. Evelyn stood frozen beside the stage, a glass trembling in her hand. I raised a remote and clicked to the next slide. The email Victor Dagan sent to Evelyn. Subject line, "Collateral must disappear. She knows too much." The she? My mother. I looked directly at Evelyn. Helena Vale was murdered. I let the truth fall like thunder. She discovered the truth behind the Linmore Initiative, a program that stole from the vulnerable and sold their bodies to science. She tried to stop it, and 2 days later, she was dead. No one spoke. So I did. For 10 years this company was rotting from the inside out. My mother tried to carve out the cancer. Instead, she was carved out. I turned slowly, deliberately. Not anymore. I clicked again. A reel began playing, footage of Victor's offshore meetings. Evelyn's wire transfers. A hidden camera capturing Elias confessing to protecting them. Every face in the room paled, every reputation in the room cracked. Then the final slide, my mother's last letter. Her handwriting, her truth. If you're reading this, then I failed to stop them. But you won't. I know you won't. They thought killing me would bury the truth, but they forgot who I raised. Security escorted Victor out first. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He knew. Then Evelyn. She tried to appeal to the crowd, to the cameras. I'm the chairwoman. This is slander. I leaned toward the mic. Effective immediately, Evelyn Vale has been removed from all positions within Vale Holdings, all assets frozen, all affiliations severed. No, she choked. Seraphina, we're family. I didn't blink. My mother thought so too, until you stabbed her in the chest with a pen that signed women into silence. Evelyn screamed something unintelligible as the guards let her out. The last time I saw her eyes, they were wild with disbelief. Not at her fall, at the fact that I had won. Elias remained behind. He approached after the room cleared, quieter than the silence that followed the storm. You didn't have to do all of this publicly, he said, voice ragged. You could have destroyed us in court. No, I replied. That would have ended with settlements. Apologies. Behind closed doors. I stepped closer. I needed the world to watch you burn. I needed every girl who was ever told to sit down and stay silent to see what it looks like when someone finally says no. He stared at me, lost. And then, broken, he bowed his head. Not from shame, from understanding, from surrender. I had done what no Vale had ever done before. I cleaned the blood off the throne. 3 months later, Vale Holdings reopened under a new name, the Helena Foundation. Every corrupt program was gutted, every cent redirected. I started initiatives in honor of the women they tried to erase. Some of them worked beside me now. Others chose anonymity, but all of them were seen, finally. My story became legend, not because I survived, but because I returned, because I came back with fire in my blood and justice in my mouth, because I didn't just inherit the throne. I took it, with bare hands, sharp teeth, and the memory of a mother who refused to let her daughter grow up small. There's a photo of me now framed in the new Vale boardroom, not because I asked, because they insisted. It sits beside the portrait of my mother. 2 women, 2 crowns. One was taken too soon. The other, she made sure no one else ever would be. So when they ask me, was it worth it? I say nothing, I only smile. Because the throne is mine, and so is every nightmare that tried to break me. Let them kneel. Forever. The world remembers me as the woman who made giants kneel. The newspapers called it a corporate coup, a scandal, a reckoning. But I don't think of it that way. Not anymore. Now, when I walk into the glass-walled tower that used to belong to a dynasty of shadows, I don't feel rage, or triumph, or even pride. I feel something quieter. Her. I kept her office exactly as it was. Not as a shrine, as a reminder. There's no one else who ever comes in here. Not staff, not security. Not even Bianca. Only me. Because no one else knows what it cost her to keep this room warm, to keep her silence unbroken, to play their games while dreaming of escape. I sit in her chair sometimes. I touch the edge of the desk. I read her notes, her scribbled thoughts, the things she wanted to build, schools, safe havens, a world where women didn't have to bleed to be heard. She wanted to do it all quietly, with dignity. But in the end, she died alone in the cold, so I took everything she ever touched, and I set it on fire. Not to erase her, to finally let her be seen. There was one more letter, unopened, found in the lining of her old travel case. I didn't expect it, didn't need it, but when I unfolded it, the paper felt like silk between my fingers. Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you've survived more than I wanted you to. But I see you, even now. I see the girl who never stopped looking for the truth. I see the woman who will one day burn down the lies we were both taught to accept. You don't have to become me, love. You never had to. But if you do, if the world forces you to, then be bigger than me. Be brighter, be wilder. Be the storm I never could be. I didn't raise a girl to inherit the throne. I raised a revolution. I wept reading it. For the first time in years, I cried like the daughter I never got to be. Not because I was weak, because I was finally safe. I no longer dream of revenge. I dream of buildings rising in her name, of scholarships for the girls they once used like cattle, of boardrooms filled with women who speak with fire in their voices, not fear. I travel sometimes, quietly, anonymously. No camera flashes, no heels, just sneakers and sky. Sometimes I volunteer under an alias at women's shelters. Sometimes I walk the streets where my mother used to take me for hot chocolate, before the war inside our name began. I don't wear the crown anymore. I don't need to. Because now the world knows who built this empire. It wasn't Elias. It wasn't Evelyn. It wasn't Victor. It was Seraphina Vale. And the girl she raised? She didn't just survive the fall. She planted her flag on the ashes. And made history kneel. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it and you would love for more, kindly comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.